Good evening and welcome. This is a regular meeting of the Princeton Planning Board on Thursday, April 16, 2026. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the resolution of regularly scheduled meetings of this board for February 2026 through January 2027. A copy was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on January 14, 2026. Legal notice on the adoption of said resolution was published in the January 16, 2026 edition of the Princeton Packet. Notice of this meeting also has been posted to the municipal website, princetonnj.gov/calendar. Notice that all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Planning Board will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet and the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on Tuesday, January 14, 2026. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. During tonight's hearing, members of the public will have an opportunity to comment and ask questions. Public comment will be heard by the board after our professional planner has finished the presentation and has been questioned by planning board members and staff. When public comment is invited, those wishing to comment orally should virtually raise your hand by clicking on the reactions or raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if participating by phone, by pressing *9. Oral comments will be taken in the order in which hands were raised. We ask with respect that members of the public express your views in 3 minutes or less. A countdown clock on your screen will help speakers keep track of time. If you have specific questions for our planning consultant, Mr. Colley, that were not addressed in his presentation or in subsequent questioning, you may pose those questions and may exceed 3 minutes if you need to. Inappropriate public comment containing obscenity, hate speech, or relating to matters not before the board will be muted. Ms. Battle, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Mr. Bottingheimer?
Here.
Councilman Cohen?
Here.
Mayor Frida?
Here.
Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Ms. Nuka?
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Here.
Ms. Perlmutter? Ms. Swimmer?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Wilson Anderson?
Here.
Chair Wilson?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Announcements. Justin Lesko, have you got anything?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members of the board and members of the public. Just the same announcement or reminder I made last week about those financial disclosure forms that members of boards, commissions, and committees need to fill out by the state's deadline of April 30th. So if you're having any trouble with that, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to troubleshoot it with anyone that needs help.
Okay, great.
Could you forward it to me? I had the one for the Board of Health, which I filled out, but I wasn't able to link anything and do another one for this board. So if you could help me out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll double check and see if you need to fill out two, or if one would just work. I see Councilman Cohen shaking his head, and I imagine
my experience has been just one, but both positions need to be listed on that form. But I wasn't able to add the second position of planning board in addition to council. I think staff can do that. So
yeah, I couldn't link it. I tried.
Exactly. Staff should be able to add that second position for you.
I can check with our municipal clerk tomorrow, and I'll let you know.
Good. Perfect. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. We have none tonight, is my understanding. So we'll move right into our hearing. And this is a hearing to determine whether certain real property located at 27 Franklin Avenue and 101 Walnut Lane, specifically Block 7301, Lot 1, and Block 31.01, Lot 105 on the tax map of Princeton, or portions thereof, meet the requirements for and should be designated under the local redevelopment and housing law as a non-condemnation redevelopment area, such that any redevelopment area determination shall not authorize the municipality to exercise the power of eminent domain to acquire any property in the study area. So we have tonight representing us as counsel, Mr. Joe Mariziti. Not many people in the state of New Jersey know more about redevelopment than Joe. Joe, welcome back.
Thank you. You're very kind, Madam Chair. Good evening.
And we have our planning consultant, Chris Colley, and of course, our planning director, Justin Lesko, who always starts us off and sets the table. So Justin, if you would do that, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to confirm that the notice is in order for this hearing tonight. And as the chair said, Chris Colley is here. He's a licensed professional planner from Topology, and he prepared the report that was included in your packet, as well as online and on file at the municipal building. I believe Chris might tell us a little bit about his qualifications and then jump right into things.
Sure, happy to.
Great.
And it would be appropriate to have him sworn, Madam Chair. I can do that unless you would rather do it.
I would not rather do it. Please go right ahead. Thank you.
Mr. Colley, do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth with respect to the matter that you're about to testify on this evening?
I do.
Please state your qualifications.
Great. Thanks for having me. My name is Christopher Colley, last name Colley. I'm a principal with the planning firm Topology. My business address is 60 Union Street, Newark, New Jersey, 07105. I have been practicing planning in New Jersey for as a licensed planner for about 5 years now. I am a licensed professional planner in the state. I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I have a degree in urban planning from Harvard Graduate School of Design. I've testified before a number of different boards in the state, some of which include Boonton, Westfield, in your neighborhood, Cranberry, Hoboken, Bernardsville, Perth Amboy, amongst others. I have never testified here, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're happy to have you. We accept your qualifications. Thanks. And before you start, I'll just note for the public that there are 31 attendees in addition to those of us who are panelists appearing on your screen. Go ahead, Mr. Colley.
Okay, terrific. I am going to share my screen. I have a presentation for you this evening. Can everyone just confirm you can see? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this is an overview of my report. I'm not going to touch on every word that was in the report, but I think it provides a pretty good summary of what we looked at and what we found. It's probably going to take me between 20 and 25 minutes to go through these slides. I will try and be efficient, but it's important for the sake of the project to give a good overview. So just to sort of get us oriented in terms of what it is that we're here to talk about this evening. As was indicated, I'm discussing a preliminary investigation, an area needed redevelopment study that was conducted for two properties, two lots, Block 3101, Lot 105, and Block 7301, Lot 1. These properties are better known locally as the Westminster Choir College site. They're a little under 23 acres, and they're generally bound by Hamilton Avenue in the south, Walnut Lane in the west, Franklin Avenue in the north, and Linden Lane in the east. To sort of set the stage for what it is that we're actually covering this evening, it's a very simple question, a nuanced question, but a simple one for the board to consider, which is, does the study area meet any of the criteria to warrant recommendation for designation as an area in need of redevelopment under the local redevelopment and housing law? And if you've read my report, which I assume you will know that my position is that yes, it does. And I'm here to really walk you through that position. The things that we're not doing tonight, and just to be clear for the board and members of the public, no action tonight will change the zoning of the property, will authorize demolition of buildings, will determine the future uses of this. We're simply here for the board to hear and ultimately make a recommendation regarding whether or not the property meets the criteria. This is not a process that is occurring in a vacuum. So we are here tonight because of an action that was taken by the municipal council. They passed a resolution back in November of 2025, directing the board to take this study, to undertake this study. After that, we've done quite a bit of due diligence on the property. We've analyzed the property from whatever angles we can think of. And ultimately, we prepared a report, which was submitted at the end of March 27th. We're here tonight, as I said, to review that. And, just importantly, I think from a sort of table setting perspective, you, the planning board, you don't actually make the designation. You make a recommendation, and ultimately this goes back to council, and the council will accept, reject, or modify your recommendation. So moving beyond sort of the introductory stuff into like what's actually in the report and what did we do. So this is, and everything you're going to see tonight is an excerpt from our report. This is a summary of all of the documents that we looked at. We looked at everything we get our hands on: municipal records, aerial photography. We visited the site a number of times. We walked through all the buildings. We looked at police records, fire records, things of that nature. And if you see the report, about 50 pages of it roughly is actually the written report, and then about 100 pages of it is appendices. So we relied, and this is common in these types of documents, on whatever documents had been provided that we could find by other professionals that sort of gave more of a specific and detailed look into certain things that we were investigating. So we looked at, there's a boiler report that we reference in there. There's some reports prepared by EWMA, by Pannoni, and by others that I think provide a lot of the color in the document. So moving to an actual discussion of the property a little bit. As I told you, we're considering this site, which you probably know as the Westminster Choir College property. And we do our best in the report to provide a sort of high-level history of the property, at least as we think is relevant to our findings. And there's some great pictures we were able to use, sourced from the Westminster Choir College Archives photograph, and a sort of paraphrasing of the history of the property, which as folks probably know, is really tied with the history and the evolution of the choir college, which moved there in the 30s and sort of evolved its footprint over time and really accomplished incredible things while they were there. As you know, if you've been to the property recently, or if you've read about it, the choir college left the site back in 2020, and if you visit now, you'll see that the site is much quieter, and the buildings are still there, but they're largely vacant, and the property doesn't really have that sort of the life that I expected it once had when the choir college was there. So our report really is centered around the buildings that are on the campus. So I do want to just make sure that folks have a good understanding of what those buildings are before I get to the statutory analysis. So there's 16 buildings on the campus, and we're going to kind of talk about them in a few groups. There's a collection of 5 buildings which center around the sort of traditional college quad. And can someone just confirm for me that you can see my cursor?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, great. Okay, thanks. So a collection of buildings which center around the traditional original university quad. You'll hear me refer to those as Williamson Hall, Erdman Hall, Taylor Hall. And these buildings were built in the 30s, as I mentioned. Also fronting that quad is a building you'll hear me refer to as the Scheide Student Center, as well as the Bristol Hall, the Bristol Chapel. Sort of immediately to the east of those buildings on the quad, there's almost a secondary quad which was constructed, which includes the Cullen Center, which is a newer building, which was built about 10 years ago now, as well as the Playhouse, which is exactly what it sounds like, a playhouse. Moving north from there, there's sort of a second generation or a third generation, depending on how you want to count it, of buildings that were constructed as the college expanded. And those include 3 connected dormitories: Dayton Hall, Ithaca Hall, and Princeton Hall, as well as Seabrook Hall, which is a standalone building. As the one interesting historical aside I will allow myself, these buildings named after the 3 locations of the choir college over time: Dayton, and then Ithaca, and then Princeton. And then sort of along the eastern edge of the property, backing it up against Linden Lane, there are a series of smaller structures, including what was once the president's house, a cottage, a relocatable classroom, and a maintenance shed. And I only take the time to go through these buildings because we're going to talk a lot about the buildings as we go through it. So I just would like folks to have an orientation with that. Briefly on the zoning, the site's actually split between 3 zones. And, interestingly here, you can see the distinction between the 2 lots. So 1 lot here and 1 lot here. And that, corresponds to the old municipal boundary between them. So that's our table setting. That's why we're here, and that's the property we're talking about. I'm going to transition into the actual criteria, and this is really the meat of the report. So how do we evaluate whether or not a property meets the criteria to be an area in need of development? There's a lot of case law on this, and sort of one of the seminal cases comes out of Perth Amboy, and this is just a quote from the report. The court sort of speaks to the type of work and the type of analysis that is supposed to go into one of these reports. You're supposed to inspect the buildings. You're supposed to look at whatever information you can find. And ultimately, you're supposed to provide substantial evidence to support whatever finding you take. And that is the reason why you're hearing my testimony. That's the reason why we wrote a 50-page report. We need to provide more than simply a statement stating that the property meets the criteria. You need to support that with evidence, which I think we did. So I will, I'm not going to walk you through all of the many criteria. I'm just going to walk you through the 3 that are important for this project, the 3 that we cited for this project. And so I'm going to read them in whole. So the first one is criteria A. It says the generality of buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any of such characteristics, or are so lacking in light, air, or space as to be conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. And in the report, you'll see how when we cite criteria A, we talk about how buildings are, meet these sort of evidentiary words in the beginning, substandard, obsolescent, and then also specifically how those conditions are conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. The second critical criteria for the purpose of our analysis is criteria D, which says areas with buildings or improvements which by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design, lack of ventilation, light and sanitary facilities, excessive land coverage, deleterious land use, or obsolete layout, or any combination of these or other factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community. So a lot there, but sort of generally similar structure. There's a clause up front about conditions, and then there's a clause at the end about impacts. And you'll also see in the report how we talk about relationship between conditions and impacts. So the way that we chose to structure this report, as well as this presentation, is to sort of talk about what I found to be the 3 most prevalent conditions that I thought related to the criteria generally, or specifically, but not specific to a particular criteria, and then tie them to the criteria. So there's 3 big ones that we cover in our report, and they have to do with water damage, accessibility, and heating and cooling systems. Okay, so we'll start with water damage. And I'll tie these to A and D in a couple minutes. But when you walk this property and you walk the buildings, you see water damage in a wide range of different forms. And probably the most extreme version of that is in Taylor Hall. Now, Taylor Hall is one of these buildings that I spoke about earlier that fronts on the quad. And Taylor Hall, there was a steam pipe that was connected to Taylor Hall, which burst a number of years back. And Taylor Hall has really suffered as a result of that. You see the red X on it. You cannot enter that building right now. The photographs that I have here, I had to take from another document. We have sort of extensive water damage and extensive steam damage in that building, which is believed to connect to extensive mold growth as well. So sort of that's your most significant example of water damage on the campus. But it's not the only place you see it as you walk around. And as I said, we walk these buildings a bunch of times. And you see water and steam and moisture sort of taking its toll on the buildings in a lot of different places, whether it's steam damage in Bristol Chapel, leaks on the ceiling in Princeton or Ithaca associated with burst pipes or leaking pipes, sort of some mold-like substances in those buildings, additional steam damage, extensive water damage in the basement of Seabrook Hall that's associated with flooding, leaking in the roofs of the Student Center, buckets sort of placed to sort of catch water where you can throughout. Oh, went backwards. The burst pipe in Seabrook again, the library with plaster on the ground from where there was water damage in the ceiling. So sort of an overwhelming condition across the buildings of water. And what we did is, we looked at, all right, well, if we were to take the whole campus and look at how much square footage is in the entire campus, and then what percentage of the buildings by square footage have some sort of water damage? Is it, a few of them? Is it most of them? It feels like a lot, but when we did that, we find that 84% of the overall building in the square footage is a building that has water damage in some capacity, and you see it sort of ranges in its case. So that's our one big condition that we start with. A second significant condition, which we cite and describe in the report as being relevant to criteria A and D, has to do with accessibility. So, you're sort of taken as you walk around these buildings by the lack of sort of standard accessible features that you find in buildings commonly today. And most vividly for me was sort of the lack of elevators, the lack of vertical circulation. So on this entire campus, you only find 2 buildings that have elevators. And it's not because they're single-story buildings, multi-story building, multi-story building, multi-story building, multi-story. You only find these 2 elevators, though. And, similar to how Taylor was the sort of most extreme version of the water damage, I find that the elevators are reflective and indicative of like the overall situation with accessibility on the campus. So, where we do have vertical circulation in Bristol Chapel, we have this chairlift, which sort of provides a limited capacity. In other buildings, we have entrances and exits that open directly into the grass, but don't have railings or other sorts of traditional accessibility features. Where we do have an elevator in the Student Center, it's behind a quite overweight door that really limits the access for someone who has a mobility impairment. And again, sort of where we have these emergency exits, they're connected to these sloped areas, which are difficult, if not impossible, for somebody in a wheelchair to get through or get out. So that's a sort of snapshot of that. But when you look in our report, we've identified a bunch of different characteristics. And when we look at the buildings from an overall perspective under that one, about 87% of them lack accessibility features as we've defined it in this report. The third common characteristic, which we're going to tie to A and D, is about heating and cooling systems. And the sort of extreme example, the most significant example that we cite in the report here, talks about the boiler system, the shared boiler system that services Williamson Hall, Taylor Hall, Erdman Hall, and the chapel. Doesn't service Taylor Hall anymore, sorry, because of the leak I told you about. And there's a report in our report that we cite that sort of speaks to the overall condition of this boiler and the challenges associated with its operation. One of the 2 boilers is offline. The second one has a number of deficiencies. And the boiler condition is kind of like reflected of the overall temperature control and heating and cooling infrastructure of the campus. So we've got the sort of obsolete and substandard boiler there, but we also, as you walk the campus, have sort of rotted windowsills that limit temperature control. We have window wells that are dilapidated. We were up on several of the roofs with the building inspector for the municipality, pointed out to us the variety of sort of patches that have been required over time to keep the roofs functional and relate probably to some of the leaks that we discussed, and a variety of other considerations about insulation and portions of buildings with no heat, overall reliance on window units to cool large areas, a variety of other sort of heating and cooling characteristics that we discuss in the report. And when we quantify that, it actually comes out to the same percentage, 87.1% of the building square footage in the study area, which have these, we're calling substandard obsolete building elements, which affect temperature control. So those are our like big themes, right, that we talk about in the report. And before I go to A and D and how they relate to those themes, the last note I'll make in this section is that while the property is 2 lots, we write the report as if it's one entity because it's common ownership, because the units have been historically affiliated. And as I say common ownership, I realize that I neglected earlier on to state that after Westminster had left, the municipality acquired the property. So the municipality acquired this property back in 2024, and I apologize for missing that note. Okay, let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, so hopefully everybody's with me, right? We've got these 3 common characteristics: water damage, accessibility, heating and cooling. And how do they tie into criterias A and D? So it's my testimony that the property qualifies under criteria A as the generality of the buildings are substandard and obsolescent in a manner that is conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. So what's the relationship between water damage and unwholesome working conditions? Well, there's an obvious link between water damage and the potential for mold growth. There's a really interesting discussion in one of the appendices about the relationship between moisture in Taylor Hall and the integrity of the building materials, and how the increase in moisture has contributed to the deterioration of those building materials in a way that's creates health risks and would be conducive to unwholesome working conditions. And then, of course, there's just the obvious but not minimal issue of slipping and falling. Like, right, if you're in a working condition or a living condition, like you're relying on a dry and safe environment to move around. And I think it's relevant just to add on here. I'm just going to read this quote out. These are conditions where water has been observed since the municipality has acquired the property, not simply just like a few old stains, right, that we've noticed in the ceiling tiles, but these are sort of pervasive conditions of water damage that we've observed throughout the campus, as my prior photos indicated. Accessibility. So what's the relationship between accessibility and unwholesome working conditions? Well, it's my testimony that the lack of accessible accommodations in these buildings is substandard and obsolescence. And like in a practical terms, like just thinking about a wheelchair user or an individual with some sort of mobility impairment, there's really limited, if no ability to access almost all of these study area buildings. So from the perspective of, you know, a wholesome working condition and a wholesome working environment, these buildings can't be used by or enjoyed by or employ in their current condition people who have those characteristics. We go into that more in the report. And, you know, one thing that's interesting, I think, that we thought about was how a lack of accessibility impacts people who don't have mobility limitations. I'm a new parent. I pushed a stroller around this campus, and these buildings that lack, you know, sort of these accessible features, they're also not accessible for someone pushing a stroller or someone who's maybe doesn't, you know, technically have a mobility limitation, but would benefit from greater access to the buildings. And then finally, heating and cooling. So what's the relationship between the sort of heating and cooling infrastructure that I discussed and unwholesome working conditions? There's a relationship, particularly between temperature and water. And I think the heating and the cooling infrastructure is an exacerbating factor for the water damage that we find on the campus. You know, lack of temperature control plus water sort of creates this feedback loop. This picture on the right, I'll just narrate for a second, actually. This was a small fire which was created in one of the maintenance buildings. because of the steam that was here. You can sort of see some of this. And that's just sort of reflective of the conditions associated with the heating and cooling. Infrastructure, one thing that we considered here is like what it means to have buildings where temperatures can't be controlled adequately, and there's a variety of standards, whether UCC or OSHA, about that, and those standards exist for a reason, because that's sort of the identified meaning of a wholesome working condition as it relates to temperature, and these buildings would struggle to meet them. So let me check my time. Okay. So those are our sort of big picture criteria A, right? There are also a variety of things which we put in the report which didn't fit within those buckets. The Hamilton House, which is the dean's residence, failed its lead inspection. Ithaca Hall has issues with the sewer pipe, which currently has required all the toilets and sinks to be shut off. Seabrook Hall has had issues with the alarm systems. So there's just a variety of substandard and obsolescent conditions, in my mind, that make this property qualify under criteria A. And these conditions are conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. So criteria D, as I said, it's similar but different. And it's our finding here that the area contains buildings and improvements which, by reasons of dilapidation and obsolescence, are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, and welfare of the community. So, walking back through our three characteristics again, water damage, like what's the relationship between water damage and health, right? Well, it's a link through mold most directly. So you wouldn't be surprised to hear that the EPA speaks to the issues associated with mold in indoor buildings. And I guess I should note here, since you've seen a bunch of quotes, any of these quotes are just quotes from the report or reports cited in the report. So, water damage, condition of dilapidation, detrimental to health and safety. Accessibility, really about obsolescence and an obsolete layout and how that's exclusionary to mobility impaired individuals. We talked through that. I was actually interested in some of the stats, like 1 in 8 adults in the United States has a mobility impairment. And we have a variety of other sort of similar findings like that. And then heating and cooling, obsolete and dilapidated systems provide inadequate and unreliable temperature control. And, there's a relationship between temperature control and lack of temperature control and health outcomes, and the impact of working or living or hanging out in areas that have temperature extremes is also something we discuss in the report. A couple more slides. So one of the differences between criteria A and D is criteria D also speaks about improvements. So, I don't think that if these were the only things we saw, this would necessarily mean qualification under criteria D, but if you walk the site, you do see dilapidated improvements. You do see cracked sidewalks, dislodged pavement, things of that nature. And like, what's the relationship between health and safety with these? I mean, they create opportunities for people to fall. They make it harder to roll a wheelchair, or push a stroller, or whatever. But you certainly find dilapidated improvements throughout the area that would have impacts on health and safety. And then sort of my closing thought about the criteria, obsolescence is like a hard word for us in the planning field. And there was this very important case a few years back, and the court helpfully provided some of the definitions of obsolescence. And I think they're really sort of help frame like what the word might mean for this campus. I think the first one's particularly useful. The condition or process of falling into disuse. And I think when you think about that in the sort of context of this property and the context of some of the photos that we've seen, or maybe things that you've seen being out there, I think it really reflects the conditions of the study area. So closing on D, the property qualifies under criteria D, buildings and improvements which by reasons of dilapidation and obsolescence are detrimental to safety, health, morals, and welfare. A note on criteria H, this is the smart growth criteria. I do find that it meets the smart growth criteria just based on the context. This is never used as a standalone criteria, but I think based on your master plan and based on sort of mixed use nature of the broader area, that would certainly be consistent with smart growth principles to designate this property. So 27 minutes. My recommendation, as you can tell, is that these properties qualify under criteria A, D, and H as a non-condemnation area needed redevelopment. The planning board's job tonight is to review the report and make a recommendation about if you feel that it also meets the criteria. The next step from that would be the council adopting a resolution, accepting, rejecting, or modifying the planning board's recommendation. And then, just for folks to understand, and then whatever may happen on this property, that would then be subject to future hearings, right? On whatever it may be, on plans or site plans or other approvals as they're applicable. So that's it for my presentation. Thank you for listening to me. I'm going to stop my share and
Madam Chair, could I suggest before we go further that the preliminary investigation be marked as an exhibit, give it an exhibit number for the record?
Yes.
What is your customary marking system? Is it could be
DB1.
DB1.
DB1. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen, and then Mr. Taylor's got his hands up too.
So I just had a brief comment about the distinction between criteria A and D. That I'm not saying you didn't say this, but I want to focus in a little bit more sharply on it, which is criteria A and D, which relate to living and working conditions, could apply to private buildings, which were not generally open to the public, whereas criteria D talks about the impact on the health and welfare of the general public. And because this is a campus which was open to the public for performances and such in the past, and since the municipality is a public entity, and one can imagine, regardless of what the uses are that would be contemplated in the future, that the campus would be open to the public. That for me is a really clear way of thinking about why the same kinds of deficiencies relate both to section A and criteria A and criteria D.
Okay.
Right. Thank you for that. Jack?
Yeah, I'm crystal clear, thanks to you, Chris, about the nature of the process. And I appreciate we're at the early stages of the process. This isn't an issue with me. What I'm missing or not quite comfortable about is the framework or the legal context of what is effectively starting tonight. A couple of questions. Number one, eminent domain is the legal basis, I understand, for acquiring the property in the community. What does that mean as a practical matter? Does it have any legal effect whatsoever in terms of what we're doing? Does it suggest that there are perhaps potential legal actions or controversies out there? What is the tone that eminent domain sets? That's really number one. Then number two, with respect to your broad experience in the state, what is the general legal effect of the recommendation that we made tonight? Does it become in legal act? What are the kinds of legal actions that can arise? Do these actions, is the evidentiary basis the language that we use in responding to the council? I'm not clear about the legal implications of what we're doing, although I understand the legal role vis-a-vis our recommendation.
Thanks for those questions, Jack. And I will let Joe jump in, but I do want to step back to the very beginning of the conversation where I clarified that what we're being asked to do is decide whether this meets the requirements for and should be designated as a non-condemnation redevelopment area such that any redevelopment area determination shall not authorize the municipality to exercise the power of eminent domain. So that's a starting point. And Joe, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, I'll certainly call upon Chris as well. He can fill in what I leave out. But with respect to eminent domain, it's my understanding, I've understood that the property has already been acquired by the municipality through that process of eminent domain. So that process is one that can be used in the event that the public body, in this case the municipality, has intention to use it for a public purpose. Valid public purposes are very broad. That's not what's in front of us tonight, as Chris mentioned earlier. Tonight is a very narrow question of whether the area meets the criteria under the statute. The statute is one that has a statutory division. The first step is the one that we're on tonight to determine whether it meets that criteria. And then the future steps, and this gets to your question of the legal effect of the recommendation. If the recommendation is accepted by the governing body and it is only a recommendation from the planning board, but the final decision is made by the governing body to accept the entire recommendation or parts of it. And if they do, then the property becomes an area in need of redevelopment. And then the next step, a separate, entirely different step, is to prepare a redevelopment plan for the future use of the site. And that redevelopment plan, and of course, I've been with you through that process with the Theological Seminary. You're very familiar with the redevelopment plan that lays out the vision and also, in effect, the zoning for the site. So that's a separate step. I'll just say one more thing about eminent domain. This is a non-condemnation area designation. The statute permits the municipality to go in either direction. It wouldn't have made any sense to have proceeded as a condemnation area in need of redevelopment because the property is already owned by the municipality. In the normal case, if a property is determined to be a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment, the two main consequences of that are, number one, that a pilot's payments in lieu of taxes are not possible in that kind of a designation. And secondly, the property cannot be acquired by eminent domain. The only one that matters here is the first one I mentioned, and that is payments in lieu of taxes are not a tool that is usable here. I'll leave it to Chris to fill in anything that you may think should be added to the record here.
Well, it's just on the pilot issue, not that we're here to talk about a pilot tonight, but correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Marizzi, it's a rehab area where pilots are not permitted, but non-condemnation.
That's right. Yes.
So a non-condemnation redevelopment area, which
I stand corrected on
Okay.
that. That's correct. Yes.
Okay.
Rehabilitation area. This is a non-condemnation.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I no doubt confused things by rereading
No,
part of the opening, and I apologize for that. But the point is that it's sort of moot because the property is already owned by the town. And so I apologize if my going back to that added to anyone's confusion.
It's well taken, Louise, and thank you, Chris and Joe. It provides context in a process that we're going to be part of for many months, perhaps years ahead. And so I thought building blocks need to be put in place.
Mm-hmm.
Good, thank you. Questions, additional questions or thoughts from board member? Oh, sorry, Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you. One of the things I'd like to clarify for myself is from what I understand, the outcome of our recommendation tonight, should we recommend this, is that the municipality can unify the zoning across the area. Is that correct?
Yes, that if the designation is made, then the redevelopment plan would be the process of establishing the zoning on that site.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And secondly, there are buildings on the site that are being currently used by various groups. What condition are those buildings in?
Sure.
It's kind of horrifying to see the pictures that we've seen, but is that it's representative of much of the campus we've seen, as you've seen 80% or so. What are the occupied sections, both the municipality and some nonprofit groups I understand are using sections of the campus?
Yeah, I mean, there are pockets of this campus, like, for example, the Cullen Center, which is one of the ones I flagged earlier. That's that performance space. That building is terrific. That's like an immaculate building. I'm not an expert in performance space acoustics, but I understand it to be incredibly well designed for that. It's in fantastic condition. So there are certainly pockets of the campus that are in great shape and that are being utilized. And that's why I thought it was important to try to quantify the campus, like, not that that's an exact science, but, to try and quantify it as best as we could, because there are pockets, but overwhelmingly, I feel like the conditions which you saw in the photographs are reflective of the conditions throughout.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Nuka?
Thank you. And so just to follow up on Mr. O'Donnell's comment, the buildings where the conservatory is operating, some of the performance halls are still in fine condition and usable condition. If the planning board accepts this recommendation and the area is declared area in need of redevelopment, will groups still be able to use the buildings that are usable?
It's a good question. It's not really, I think, a question that's part of the recommendation, or part of, like, this hearing.
But I think, although I guess an answer is not required to that, there's no thought by the governing body at the moment that this designation would change the use by any of the groups now on the campus.
I would say that the designation itself doesn't change anything that's going on at the time.
Correct.
The redevelopment plan would lay out a future for it, but that redevelopment plan would have to be implemented at some point in some way. So the mere designation would not change the use.
Yeah, and maybe I should just tack on to that. Buildings that are declared an area in need of redevelopment, that doesn't mean they're buildings that are necessarily, like, not accessible, meaning, like, you can't go in them. It's not like at the end of that process, a sign is hung from the door and there can be no access because of the declaration. So from that perspective, it wouldn't impact those particular uses.
Okay.
And thank you, Mayor, for clarifying that. Mr. Bodekheimer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question for Chris and Joe Marizzi alike. I was just wondering if you could help us a little bit contextualize some of a little more the conditions that you observed, and either refer us to other kinds of past examples that we might be familiar with in this area that had met this test in the past and had proceeded either through public, just basically satisfied the public and also satisfied perhaps the courts if that was necessary.
I can take the first stab at that. So it's going to be difficult for me to give you local Princeton examples of buildings with similar conditions. But to the second point, as I mentioned during the presentation, there's a certain standard of documentation of evidence that we're expected to, and that I personally expect to include in one of these reports. And that's why like it's so important to have attached to reports like this appendices that speak to particular conditions, photographs that detail specific conditions, references to whether regulations or standards or studies about the impacts of these conditions on people in buildings. That's for me sort of the bar to get over is can you assemble that evidence in a narrative that that holds together. Personally, I have written studies that have been accepted that dealt heavily with water damage and the impacts of water damage on buildings, that referenced accessibility and the impact of accessibility on buildings. I've never personally seen a boiler like this, but that didn't give me pause that like that was somehow outside of the parameters of what would be an acceptable piece of evidence for this report and for the property.
Mr. Cohen?
I just wanted to make one additional comment related to this because I don't think any of our other areas in need have been challenged in court. Some of the redevelopment plans have been challenged, but the designations have not been challenged. So in specific response to Nat's question about satisfying the courts, we don't have any history locally about, the designations that we've done satisfying the courts.
Linda Schwimmer?
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to thank Chris for his presentation. I think it was very clear, and certainly I'm convinced of the need for redevelopment or designating this as a redevelopment area. I'm wondering, it's a process question. Do we at this point make a motion, or do we hear from the comments from the public when we're done discussing, or what's the next step to move forward?
Yeah, after we've discussed, sorry, Joe, please jump in after I
Go.
fill in any blanks. After the board has had its discussion and Q&A, I will open the meeting for public comment, and we'll hear comments, opinions, questions from members of the public. And then when everyone has had an opportunity to, and right now there are 40 members of the public in attendance, when everyone who wishes to speak has done so and asked whatever questions they have, expressed their views, then I'll close public comment. We'll have additional discussion and consider a motion. Joe Mariziti, did I leave anything out?
No, I would just add a little bit of a nuance here. This witness is subject now to cross-examination by anyone who wishes to ask him questions. And I would suggest that when members of the public address the witness, that they first put their questions to him in the form of that process of cross-examination, and then separately make a comment. So if there could be some discipline, I know it's hard to do, between a question and commentary. Commentary is subject to the time limitation. Questions are not.
Mm-hmm.
So appropriate questions that are addressing the testimony are appropriate, and that's the cross-examination phase of it.
Okay, so you're suggesting or asking that members of the public, if they have questions, start with their questions?
Yes.
And do comments afterward. Okay.
I would suggest that.
And they will be sworn, the members of the public?
No,
Yes.
well, actually, no, they're not going to be giving testimony. I don't know. Maybe there are people who want to testify. But if they're just simply questioning, then they would not be sworn. If there are people in the audience who want to put on a case in opposition, maybe there's someone in the audience with an attorney who wants to oppose this, that would be a different process where we would swear them. But with respect to questions, those are in the nature of cross-examination with not any need to swear people asking those questions, and comments are comments, it's opinion.
Okay, so just so our practice has been always to swear in people who are offering public comment. So I'm not disputing what you're
Yeah.
saying. I'm just saying that this is a departure to some degree. And so maybe is it fair to separate, if we're separating questions from comment to
I'm splitting a hair perhaps,
Yeah.
because a comment is not a factual statement, it's an opinion. And so you don't swear to the truth of it. It's an opinion.
I think the reason why we have sworn people in the past is in case they lapse into
Well,
testimony.
that's why
And
the hair split, and maybe that happens, that.
I think there's little harm in swearing people in, and
I won't
perhaps
object to it. I won't object to it.
I think that I think I would like to do so because we always do, and I don't want for this to be a departure from our normal process. Although I
I
recognize
think
the points you're making, I'm not disputing those.
consistency is important as well.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments or questions from board members? Okay, then I will invite now members of the public who wish to pose questions to Mr. Colley and express opinions. Now is the time to virtually raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. We have hands going up as I speak. I think we've already brought over the first person, Josh Zinder. Next to come over will be Nancy Hartog and then Edward McClure. Welcome, Mr. Zinder.
Hello. I was going to have my question toward the end, but if you really want, I can do it at the beginning. If you want to swear me in, I'll swear me in. I swear to tell the truth. Right?
Do you affirm to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God during these proceedings?
Yes. So I was going to ask a question at the end, but you wanted it sooner. So I'm Joshua Zinder. I live at 142 Moore Street. I'm an architect here in town. So my house is about a block, maybe a block and a quarter away from the site. My question was, I had hoped to find recommendations from typology on which structures were worthy of restoring and keeping. And I'm curious why it was not done at this stage. I can wait for the answer until I'm done. What I was going to say. I have been in these buildings and I have observed the damage years ago. I can't imagine how their state has deteriorated further. I'm glad to see that Princeton is taking the first step with this redevelopment plan for the site. It's about time. I would like to note to everyone here tonight that just because a building is damaged and neglected does not mean it is not worthy to restore and rehabilitate and valued for its historic architectural presence. Solutions to make buildings accessible are done all the time and achievable if the plan suggests there is value in doing so, and creative individuals are engaged. It is possible. Adaptive reuse is a powerful tool for design and rehabilitation of this site, and I hope it is encouraged by the planners despite the neglected state of the buildings. As adaptive reuse, there are many sustainable systems, heating, cooling, mechanical systems that can be brought to the site in support of a restoration of many of these structures. And then I was just going to say, failing a lead inspection, as was mentioned with the house, is not uncommon in residences in Princeton, and it is rectified often. I am pleased that the buildings will now be rehabilitated. I look forward to seeing this redevelopment classification move forward and take the first real step to reactivate and re-engage and restore many of these structures and the entire property in support of the community and bringing new and vital uses to the property. I hope the board votes positively for this tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zinder. So, Mr. Colley, did you come to an opinion about which structures are worthy of restoring?
I didn't, and it's not something that I would do in this study. So, but I'm totally understanding and empathetic with the sentiments. Like, and I tried to hit this in the beginning. Let me say it better now. Just because a building is in an area that is declared to be in need of redevelopment, or even if the characteristics of that building contribute to the designation as being in need of redevelopment, does not mean that that building should be torn down necessarily. And there are certainly ways to rectify the conditions and the characteristics that led to this area in need of redevelopment. And like, I don't want the takeaway to be area in need of redevelopment and demolition are equated and equivalent in any way.
Great.
Thank-
Thank you. I think we were bringing over Ms. Hartog next.
Madam Chair, could I just add a comment?
Yes, yes.
And Joe, I actually need to be sworn in on this one as well.
You affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Just for everyone's knowledge, both newer board members, members of the public, one of the last times that the board did one of these area need studies was with the shopping center. And that's kind of a illustrative example because it was the shopping center parcel and 3 parcels adjacent to it. But then only a redevelopment plan went on one portion of it. So obviously the majority of the site has not changed since that was declared an area in need of redevelopment in, I think, 2021. So just to kind of further Chris's point with a local example.
Good, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Hartog. If you could activate your camera and unmute yourself, we would love to hear from you. Hi.
Hi. I guess I should be sworn in.
You
Is
should
that
be
Yes,
sworn
ma'am.
in, yes. Do you
Okay.
affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. I guess I first have a question for Chris Colley, and that is, did you visit while the nonprofit arts groups were functioning, like during lessons, during performances or recitals? I guess I'll stop with that question for now. I have a comment.
I've been in the buildings a number of times. I don't know that I've been there when every group was operating, but I've certainly
Mhm.
been in the buildings when some of them were, yeah.
The reason I asked that, and this
Hmm.
is maybe to follow up on Mr. O'Donnell and Miss, I'm sorry, someone else spoke in a similar vein, that it's just, I was concerned about the term, oh no, now I've forgotten it. Something like desolation or in the report, as I understood it, that a property can be deemed not abandoned. You didn't use, that was not the word, but just in light of the fact that there are continuing groups functioning there, and for whom I'm not sure there are other possible sites to be used. And I realize this would be part of a plan. I'm not trying to argue against the designation tonight. But just that I think historically, of course, there was a choir college, and that at least part of this property should be used for arts and nonprofit arts in a community setting, both for performance and for practice and for teaching. Those are all opinions. I personally helped create not here in Princeton, but in other places, worked in children's theater and it's finding space for those kinds of things is always very, very difficult. And getting support, and yes, it would be wonderful. I mean, and of course you want it to meet ADA requirements, have healthy places for people to be, but it would be helpful at some point to hear which buildings could be without tremendous cost retooled and refashioned for use. I guess that's it.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, I happen to know, and I know that other board members do too, that the one hall, is it Cullen? Is that what it was? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Is in terrific shape. It's relatively new. It's used a lot. The Westminster Community Orchestra is there, as are other groups, and there's teaching and learning and wonderful programming going on. And
Yes.
as Mayor Frida indicated, there's no appetite or intent, as I understand it, to evict or otherwise displace anyone. But this sets the stage for if we do come to the conclusion that this meets the criteria for area in need of redevelopment designation, sets the stage for a planning process where we figure out, well, which buildings would we as a community, led by council's efforts, determine what uses, what mix of uses, what community benefits, what
Right.
buildings are candidates for adaptive reuse, and which ones just aren't. But that's a later step along this road.
Okay. I just, it was the term, I'm sorry, I'm losing it.
Dilapidated, maybe.
Dilapidated.
That's the
No,
word.
not
that
quite, but
Blight was in the report, and that's often a term that gets people excited.
yes. Okay, thank you. Also, I've seen many performances there for my grandchildren. Thank you for letting me testify.
Thank you. Mr. McClure, you're up next. If you could, I see you're activating your camera and unmuting yourself. Thank you. Mr. Marizzi will swear you in.
Yes, Mr. McClure, do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth on this matter?
Yes, I do. I don't intend to give a comment or testimony. I just have a question.
Okay.
For anyone knowledgeable enough to answer it. Since the municipality already owns the property, presumably it could proceed to do whatever seems necessary. What are the advantages of making this determination that the planning board is considering tonight? And if there are any disadvantages? That's my question.
And that is an important question to answer. So I'll leave it to Mr. Colley and Mr. Marizzi to answer that.
Chris, I'll yield to you.
Sure.
first.
I mean, the real outcome of an area need a redevelopment designation is most commonly the preparation of a redevelopment plan, which allows you to set a vision and set a framework for a site. And that's really the primary advantage of proceeding with the designation. The secondary component that's opened up by the redevelopment designation are the financial components that are part of redevelopment. Both of those things, the redevelopment plan and any of the other financial components, are all things that ultimately come from council and come back to council. So in a way, the board is here to hear this question about, does the property qualify? And then the outcomes of that ultimately are sort of back in the court of the municipal council.
I would certainly agree with all that and say that the comments that we've received so far are illustrative of comments to be made for the next step, which is, what do we do with it once this process is concluded? The plan is where the comments about adaptive reuse and selecting buildings and making changes and all of that becomes a robust conversation, and the municipality has the opportunity to deal with zoning issues and that sort of thing in that process.
Mr. Marizzi, can you speak a little bit to the flexibility that a town has with the redevelopment area designation, flexibility as to uses, as to negotiating with different people who occupy the property, or that kind of thing?
Sure. The contrast is between the municipal land use law, where there's zoning for a particular area. This site is a little different because the municipality owns it, but leave that out of the equation for a second. When you have municipal land use law governing the zoning of an area, and a property owner comes in with a complying application, there's very little that can be adjusted in that process. There's an entitlement to go forward with that as of right zoning. With redevelopment, it's a whole different kind of a conversation. Municipality, first of all, if this area, there's a very particular statutory process that enables the municipality, once it's declared an area in need of redevelopment, to think big, come up with a new vision and new zoning requirements. And then as the implementation goes forward of those particular uses on that site, there's a negotiation process that can be engaged in with private parties if that's the desire. That's not something that can be done under municipal land use.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McClure. Welcome, Mr. Madison. Mr. Marizita will swear you in, and then you can ask your questions or state your opinions.
Mr.
Or
Madison,
both.
good evening. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, by qualification, most of my career has been involved working either for developers, corporations, or investors in a construction and real estate capacity. I also served on the planning board for 13 years, 3 as a chairperson. Here in Princeton, I've lived here in Princeton for 47 years. I supported definitely the purchase of this property, believing that it could be a great asset to Princeton. What surprises me is that most developers, investors, and even homeowners, before they purchase a property, do a thorough analysis or investigation through a home inspector or otherwise of a property before they buy it. It gives them an opportunity to either walk away or use it as a negotiating tool to lower the price. My understanding, and perhaps Mayor Frieda could correct me if I'm wrong, is that that was not done for the $42 million purchase of this building. And now it's being done only to discover that even though there were classrooms in operation 5 years ago, it has deteriorated substantially. I do agree with Josh Zinder that we should try to reuse those buildings as much as possible. But I am, and I'm sure other taxpayers are concerned about all these costs now that have been identified by Mr. Colley. So I guess my question would be, well, first of all, let me mention one other thing. The dorms are obviously in bad condition. There are developers who do affordable housing developers that should be considered for the redevelopment of the rear of the site with affordable housing, not 80-20 affordable housing, which is taking over the Princeton, but rather 100% affordable housing. And developers can be enticed to do that by doing a land lease by the owner of the property back to the developer for 30 or 40 years. But anyhow, my question, I guess, getting back to the mayor, is why wasn't any kind of a pre-purchase analysis similar to what Mr. Colley has done performed before incurring $42 million of debt to the taxpayers?
If I may simply clarify, the purpose of the questioning is for the witness, Mr. Colley, on his testimony.
Okay.
That's the appropriate function of this hearing, and the cross-examination is not of the members of the board or members of the governing body, but rather of the witness. And if you have a question for Mr. Colley, that would be an appropriate question.
Okay, well, Mr. Colley, I believe, was not involved in the purchase of the property. So I will retract my question, other than to just say that it's a big surprise that all of a sudden there are potential costs that could have been anticipated. Thank you.
Thank you,
Can I
Mr.
just
Madden.
say, without answering Peter's question, Peter, happy to talk to you later on this week.
Okay, I'll call you.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. I think next we have bringing over Bill Wolf, and then next after Mr. Wolf, Joe Butler, and then someone who is identified as DHF. Welcome, Mr. Wolf. Can you activate your camera, please?
I don't know where to do that on your site here.
There's a little icon at the lower left of your screen with a
Oh, I
little...
see it now. It
There you
wasn't
go.
appearing before. Now I see it.
So, Mr. Wolf, I will swear you. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give it will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yep.
My name is William Wolf. I live at 50 Hawthorne Avenue, which is directly across the street from the Scheide Student Center. And I've lived there for 40 years. And I served on a very similar committee of the planning board, working with the seminary in redeveloping their site. And so I'd like to volunteer if you set up a committee to serve in that similar capacity. I do have reservations about the process that you are considering tonight, because it insists on treating the whole property as one entity, one broad brush, one designation, and then scattershot finds a lot of examples in different buildings to justify that one single designation. I think what you're doing is making more complexity than necessary, because you own the property, you have the capacity to rezone the property, you have the capacity to plan the property. The advantages that Mr. Marzati stated only applied to other owners than municipalities. You're not in danger of having some other developer walking in and pulling the rug out from under you. So my question is, why are you doing this? In the context of you're just making it easier for people to pick your decisions apart.
I can respond to the question specifically about the report.
Actually, I would like the municipal planner to answer it.
Sure.
If he's still there.
Well, as I said before, just to keep the structure correct here, the cross-examination is of the testimony given by the witness. So to be somewhat technical about it, which lawyers are, the appropriate cross-examination is of what was included in the testimony of Mr. Colley. That's the appropriate purpose of this proceeding this evening. If you want to make a comment, I understood you have just made a comment, and that is an appropriate thing to do as well. And the question about why is really a question for the governing body, which asked that this step be taken. This was not a decision of the planning board. There was a resolution adopted by the governing body, which is the statutory way to begin this process, asking that the planning board conduct this investigation and this hearing and then report back with a recommendation. So I'm trying to keep some structure to the process this evening to make sure that we stay on track. I hope you understand that.
Thank you, sir. But I realize that Mr. Colley and yourself have already answered this question from your perspective, and therefore I would like to address it to Mayor Mark Freda, who I guess is the person who serves on both the council and the planning board?
Well, Mayor Freda and Councilman Cohen both serve on the planning board.
Okay.
And I think my suggestion would be to take this question to them offline, because as Mr. Mariziti noted, or in a council meeting, what we're here to do tonight is determine whether the evidence and the arguments are that Mr. Colley described earlier and that are laid out in detail in his report are persuasive as to the need or the benefits of declaring this an area in need of redevelopment. And so the question of, well, why are we going this route is a question for council. And I personally think it's a good way to go. I'm not at all trying to punt to them out of some sense of uncertainty or ambivalence. Personally, I just don't want to go down that particular rabbit hole and spend the whole night talking about something that is a council matter and not a planning board matter. Mr. Cohen?
I just want to suggest that I think it is appropriate for Mr. Colley to answer the portion of Bill's question that had to do with why do the whole campus together as opposed to separating it out into pieces. Chris did touch on it, but he could elaborate on it a little bit. And I think that's a worthy question that should be answered.
Thanks.
Sure. So the sort of study area boundaries are set by the block and lots. I guess that's where we start, right? So we evaluate all of the conditions that we find within those blocks and lots. We chose to evaluate the two lots together, and this is relatively common practice because they're commonly owned and they're affiliated with one another, and they've historically operated as a single entity. Regarding the sort of like cherry picking of conditions across the entirety of the campus, the purpose of sort of describing building by building and providing photographs across the range of buildings was to hopefully convey that the characteristics that we found and the conditions that we described really weren't limited to like very specific, nooks and crannies of this campus. They're conditions that we found building after building as we walked in and, door after door as we opened. So I do feel like the characteristics that we described were present across the majority of the campus, the generality of the campus.
Thank you for that. Ms. Schwimmer?
Yeah, just following up on Councilman Cohen's comment and the question as it was posed, I do think it would be helpful to the board as we vote or consider this and vote to just have some guidance from either the planner or Joe on the related benefits. So, to the consideration. I mean, from what's been discussed and presented, I think one of them clearly is thinking about it as the full, all of the lots, because they've been historically used together, even though they're separate lots. So there could be an organized planning process. That seems to be a clear benefit. But if there's any others that relate to our decision making of the benefits, and if there's something that we should be aware of that would be a negative, I think that would certainly be helpful for us in terms of our vote before it goes to council. So not getting into the specifics of future use or anything like that, just really the pros and cons of the process that's before us today, the process question.
The process question is a very narrow process question, actually, that you've been presented. You've been given a particular focused and defined question, which is, does the area that's described, as has been described by the witness, meet the statutory criteria to be declared an area in need of redevelopment? That's the limited question before the planning board. That's your focus on answering that question based on, as Chris has said, substantial evidence in the record. So what he has provided is his testimony as evidence, coupled with the report that has attached to it the appendices with the additional information that he has identified. And we have marked that report in evidence. So now you have that a collection of factual information in front of you. And it's on the basis of evaluating that evidence and making a decision whether you believe that there is enough evidence to conclude that the area is in need of redevelopment for either of any of the three. Actually, I agree that Section 8 smart growth should not stand alone, but it has been evaluated under two different criteria, A and D, and under the statute, one is enough to declare an area in need of redevelopment. So I am being as precise as I can because your role is very precise. It is a role that has blinders on it in a sense. It's not looking toward what's coming next. It's not looking back as to why you're here. It's looking at this particular narrow question that the governing body has given you under the statutory scheme that the legislature has set out some number of years ago. So I hope that helps understanding what your role is. That's the basis of your function here tonight, is not to decide whether redevelopment is a good idea or not a good idea, not to decide whether this should have come a different way. All of these are valid questions that there's another forum for that. But the forum for this question tonight is before the planning board. It's a very narrow question.
And I just want to say thank you for that, Joe. After we dispatch with our duty, maybe we can spend a little time talking about the context, because we are at the early stages of as I understand it, a multi-step process where there will be community input and where a lot of thought has been and conversation thought has been put into and conversations had about potential reuses and what kind of process extends out before Princeton, after tonight. So if there can be, if we can spend 5 minutes on that, Mayor Frida and Councilman Cohen, after we have made a decision about the suitability or the persuasiveness of this report, then maybe we'll have fewer questions that are not relevant to what we are here to do tonight. If that makes sense. Is that all right? David and Mark, can you, after we're done, can you talk a little bit about what happens next?
Sure.
Okay. Next up, we have Joe Butler, and then we'll bring over DHF, and after that, April Redlinger. Welcome, Ms. Butler.
Hi.
Mr. Marziti.
Yes, good evening. Oh, I see you now. Do you affirm that your testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. Yes. There's a lot to knit together here, so I've got to pull my notes from different sections. First, I'm trying to understand the description of the property as largely vacant. And could you clarify what that means in this context? And can you identify which buildings are currently in use and whether those buildings are considered safe and functional? And I ask because I recently attended a municipal meeting on the site. And as others have mentioned, there are other nonprofit groups that are also using portions of the campus. So it would be helpful to understand how those functioning buildings are treated in the analysis and whether they are considered part of the generality of buildings meeting the criteria.
Sure.
You want me to keep going or you want to answer that? I have more.
I suggest you go one at a time.
Okay.
traditional way.
Okay. So we'll take the question piece by piece. I guess can you give me the first piece of the question again?
Well, the description was largely vacant.
Yeah.
That the properties or the buildings on the property are largely vacant.
Yeah.
And yet we know that the municipality is holding meetings there, other people are holding meetings there. And then, so it was how the functioning buildings are being treated in the analysis and whether they're considered part of the generality of buildings meeting the criteria.
Right. So largely vacant, I think that's really taken from just a descriptive portion of the report up in the the property history section. Vacancy is not part of the criteria that's being cited. There is a criteria about vacancy, like we're not claiming vacancy here as being a sort of defining characteristic for the campus. So, but generally, like which buildings are definitively vacant, I can tell you, Dayton and Ithaca Hall, certainly vacant. Seabrook Hall is certainly vacant. The Talbot Library has always been vacant when I've been in it. Bristol Chapel has been vacant when I've been in it. Taylor Hall is certainly vacant. Erdman Hall has been vacant when I've been in it. The Cullen Center has been occupied at times when I've been in it. The Playhouse, I don't recall. The other sort of ancillary buildings, the cottage, the relocatables have been vacant when I've been in them. The President's House has been vacant when I've been in it. And Williamson Hall has been occupied on the lower level, the basement level, but has always been vacant when I've been in it at any of the upper levels.
So how many functioning buildings are there?
Functioning is a tough word, right? So, and I guess one of the challenging things about, buildings is like they have many components and they have many characteristics, right? And that's why we tried to, in our report, sort of like pull apart the different conditions that we would find in the building and talk about how those buildings related to the criteria. So functioning is a hard one. Like functioning is not a word that I evaluate under the statutory criteria. I guess of the buildings I've just named, five of them have had activity in them that I've been aware of during the study area.
So we presume those are safe for the public to use?
So there's two things going on here. One is the working conditions criteria, right? And the second one is criteria D, which deals with health, safety, morals, and welfare. There's a spectrum of safety. That's why I've sort of in the report detailed the nature of the conditions that we've found. I don't know. I'm not a I don't know what the right word would be. I think it's a reasonable presumption for you to have that they're safe.
It's the municipality.
I'd say the ones that are in use are safe, but mostly not accessible. So remember, that was one of the important criteria that qualifies them as in need of rehabilitation.
That's kind of another question that I have is how would we would all like to see the buildings accessible, handicapped accessible, but how would you identify the lack of accessibility, whether it rises to the level of unwholesome working condition, as that term is used in the statute, rather than just functionally?
Sure. Well, we included a table in that section where we looked at specific characteristics of each of the buildings and evaluated them based on different types of accessibility infrastructure that would traditionally be accommodated in those buildings. So it was our finding that of those characteristics, overwhelmingly the buildings lacked them. And that's really why I showed the elevator image to begin with, right? Because it's kind of the most visible lack or visible deficiency from an accessibility perspective of the buildings. I do think it's helpful to remember that we are considering sort of all three of these components together that we cited. But if you look at the table that we prepared that describes the different accessibility characteristics, I think you'll have a better understanding of the types of things that we looked for to determine whether or not we found that the buildings lacked accessibility.
I don't doubt that they lack accessibility, but whether that rises to the level of unwholesome working condition, according to the statute, was kind of my question.
Sure.
I'm also trying to understand the timing of the conditions that you described. So the municipality has had the building for about how long? Over a year?
Yes, the municipality
so-
acquired the building or the property in September 24. Or passed the ordinance to acquire the property in September of 2020.
So a year and a half, almost, really. But, and can you clarify which conditions were documented prior to the acquisition and whether a baseline condition was established? And how should the public understand conditions that may have persisted or changed under municipal ownership? Like, we've had a history in town. People can let their properties deteriorate, including the municipality, and then meet the standard to declare them an area in need of redevelopment.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sort of encouraging bad behavior. So it builds on something, I don't know, another one of the speakers said that is probably not your purview, but I think a lot of people are trying to reconcile two things. On the one hand, the report describes deterioration and obsolescence, and on the other hand, the town acquired these through eminent domain and compensated the owner between $42 and $50 million for debt. And so, like, trying to square those two assessments, the valuation that was paid and what we're now understanding about the properties.
Chris, would it be fair to say that the deterioration of the buildings has not changed significantly from the date before we purchased it to today?
It's hard for me to say because all I know, like I have commissioned my report over the last, the council resolution was in November. So like over that period, right? So I have, that's when I've visited the property for this purpose. That's when I've taken these photographs. That's when I've considered the property in this light. So I can't really like speculate about, prior to that.
But Mark, you're trying to say.
I thought Chris might be able to answer that question. And,
Okay.
and I would say in my visits to the site, I would not say, it seems to me that one question you're asking, a leading question, has the town allowed the buildings to deteriorate to the point to allow what's trying to happen tonight to happen? And I would say the answer is absolutely positively no. The buildings that were so deteriorated before we purchased them, that they are not significantly different than they were before we bought them. They're way past their prime. And
Right.
It's just a fact of life.
Right. So,
And the value of most property in town is not the buildings or structures on the property, it is the property itself.
so the price that was compensated was for the value of the land, is what you're,
I simply made a comment that
okay.
you ask any real estate agent, they will tell you most of the value is the property, not the structures on the property.
And Ms. Butler, we're afield, we're out of the lane.
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
That we need to
So,
stay in for this.
I
hearing.
just want to make I guess ask a question about the public process, because when Topology was hired a year ago, I remember going to that event, the bicycle event, to speak with Chris. There was going to be a lot of public input, a lot of discussions. A year has gone by, and now we have this A&R process, but I haven't seen a lot of public input other than a survey, which I didn't see any results from that survey. There might have been posted somewhere, but I didn't see them. And I guess I'm not understanding why we're going to the A&R at this stage, when theoretically we haven't had the public discussion about what the process, not what the process is going to be, but what people want to see on the site or what might be possible on the site. So it feels like there's a plan that the public's unaware of.
Which is not part of the planning board's role.
Not
right. But that is, but Joe, that is a discussion that should be had with the governing body when
right.
it comes up.
So my question was really, what additional authority does this designation provide? And why is it important to make the determination before a specific plan for the site has been established?
Well, I'll quickly answer that. The statute sets it up that way. There can't be a plan without this process, a redevelopment plan. The process calls for a two-step process, and this step is blind with respect to what's coming next. It's simply a question of whether there's, I'm going to repeat myself, substantial evidence before the planning board that the area meets the statutory criteria. That's the only question tonight. Then, as you point out, there will be a further process if this recommendation, and it would only be a recommendation, is accepted by the governing body, and the area or some significant part of it is declared to be in need of redevelopment. That then sets the stage for the public comment and the plan about adaptive reuse, about selecting buildings for repair, selecting other buildings for other uses. That process begins after this step. So it's a sequential, deliberately legislative sequential process, and we're in this step now. There will be other steps, and that's where the public involvement and comment and suggestions about the nature of the plan, the redevelopment plan, are appropriate. And what I've seen in the past in Princeton, it's rather robust.
Well, I guess I was using plan in a different way, in a different meaning, not the actual technical plan of what it's going to be, but a year has gone by and I haven't heard the public discussion about, do we want housing? Do we want this? Do we want that? It's fine. I guess one final question, and that is, in light of Malanga versus West Orange, do you think it's wise? Do you think it jeopardizes the status of the A&R to continue to let people use the property for meetings? And I mean, that was part of the argument with that library. The wall had fallen down and people were continuing to use the library. And so it really wasn't obsolescent at all. I don't know. It's beyond my pay grade. I just think it's a red flag.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly considered Malanga while we were preparing the report. Like, I think there's a distinction between these properties and the conditions that were in there, that were present at that time.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks.
Butler. Next, please bring over HF. We have 6 more members of the public who would like to speak. DHF, and then April Redlinger, and then Ohad Mayblum. So if you could bring over DHF, please.
I've declined to be promoted to a panelist to speak. I'll try again.
Okay.
But April's here.
Yeah, let's go ahead. We'll hear from Ms. Redlinger and then from DHF if that person wants to speak. Welcome.
I'm April Redlinger. I'm at 226 Moore Street. So just on the other side of the high school from the Westminster property.
Good evening, and do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. So I have a question, and I think you sort of alluded to it a little bit, but I guess just for the sake of my own understanding of it, I just wanted to know, how does the historic nature of any of the buildings come into play in the analysis?
Very minimally. Very minimally. I consider the buildings against the statute. The statute doesn't really say about age being a factor. That certainly would be a part of any planning process, right? Age of buildings, architecture of buildings, all of that. But from the purpose of, do they meet these criteria, age is minimally important.
There's like no leniency given to like as the analysis if it is like an older building or things like that.
There's always gray area here. Yeah. And like perhaps if there was one old structure on a piece of property and that structure didn't have an elevator on it, would I have written a report, citing this property and that sole characteristic warranting designation as in need of redevelopment? Maybe not, right? But we consider sort of holistically the various characteristics. So, and no, like age plays very little role in that.
Thank you.
I would just like to add something if I could, Madam Chair. That just for Ms. Redlinger's knowledge and members of the public that are curious as well. If you remember back to the master plan that was adopted in 2023, in the historic preservation element, we do include the original buildings from the quad as an area that should be studied in the future for potential historic designation. The blunt tool that is zoning does not always, comply with keeping older buildings. But the redevelopment plan would, and I'm going to use that F word again, would allow flexibility in a way that just rezoning would not.
So that would be something that the public can comment on at a later date when the plan is to play, when we see what the plan will be.
Yes.
Certainly.
Yes.
Do you have any idea what the timeline of that would be as far as when this plan? I mean, I know it's not really the nature of this call tonight, but I'm just kind of getting an idea in my mind of like what that process would be.
We'll ask,
I do not.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I do not have that time frame now. As Chris mentioned in his presentation, that would be a next step that would be decided upon by council. We would likely bring in a consultant, as we've done in the past, to write the plan, engage the public, and then ultimately it goes, I want to say, council, then planning board, then back to council. You're welcome.
Thank you. DHF, welcome. Thanks for activating your camera. If you could unmute yourself and tell us your name for starters, and then we'll swear you in and hear your questions.
Thank you. My name is David Flagg, born in Princeton Hospital 73 years ago. So I'm old. But can you see my hand? My hand is up, I guess.
Yeah, and you're echoing some. So do you have us on your phone as well as on your laptop or something? And
I'm just on the laptop.
Okay, well, we can.
I go to audio.
No, don't worry about troubleshooting.
Okay. Thanks. Whoops.
That's a slippery slope. Let Mr. Mariziti swear you in, Mr. Flagg, and then you can.
Can you see my hand?
Yes.
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Flagg. Do you affirm that you will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth with respect to your testimony tonight?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Mr. Coley, thank you for your presentation. Is it fair to say that these buildings that are in bad shape, a lot of that is because of lack of maintenance as well as lack of use? Is that a fair statement?
I think that's probably a factor. Yeah.
Will this, if something goes wrong in the future while this process is moving forward, will maintenance be done on the property, or does it depend on what goes wrong?
That's a tough question. I don't know if that's really my question to answer.
Yeah.
Let me, so Joe, tell me can I answer that question, or should we not answer that?
I'm not going to say no to anybody who wants to say something. I'm just telling you what the guidelines are and what the purpose is, and certainly not going to tell the mayor he can't speak.
Well, okay, but by the same token, I don't want to take us down a rabbit hole, but I will say this: if there's any necessary maintenance that has to be done, it would be done. If on some of the buildings that are not being used and will not be used, like the dorms, we have shut a couple of those. We have turned off the water. We have turned off the heat, simply because maintaining them is not cost effective. So there's no yes or no answer to your question. It is very subjective as to what's in the best interest cost-wise and just what makes sense. But we are paying attention to that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And sorry about the echo.
That's all right. Anything else?
I think that was it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next we have.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Oh, yes. Excuse me.
I was
Go
trying to
ahead.
get Mr. Flagg before he left. There's another account with his name with a hand up. I guess we'll bring that over in a second and find out who the real David Flagg is.
That's why I was echoing.
That's
Yeah.
why it was echoing. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome.
Hello, good evening. My name is Ohad Mayblum. I'm at 174 Dodge Lane.
Thank you. Go ahead, Joe.
And do you affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much. Mr. Colley, thank you for the report. My question is directed to the percentages that you provided in terms of percentage of square footage that suffers from water damage, for example, etc. And if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you would include into that number the entire square footage of a building if there is some water damage in the building.
That's right. That's how we calculate it. Yes.
So, for example, if there's water damage in one floor, the square footage of the entire building would be included in the final number,
That's correct.
or even if it's in one room.
Yes, that's how we calculated it.
Okay, so for example, with respect to water damage,
Mhm.
84% I think was the number. What that number means is that there is some water damage in buildings that have a combined square footage equal to 84% of the square footage of the entire, of the generality of the building.
That's exactly right.
But, okay, but in actuality, it's possible that there is water damage just in a much smaller portion of the entire square footage. In other words, if you look building by building and you just calculate, let's say, the floors or the rooms that suffer from the damage, you might end up with a number much smaller than 84%.
You may. And how to quantify this was certainly a challenge when preparing the report. Water has a tendency of moving. Water has a tendency of not being visible necessarily to the naked eye as you're moving about the building. So I felt that if there were buildings where I observed water damage, and I tried to really show with the photographs, and I think I even said this during the presentation, we weren't simply seeing a few drops on the ceiling, right, and then checking off water damage. This was a prevalent, visible, even sometimes ongoing issue. But yeah, the way you've described how we calculated is exactly how we calculated it. I think it was an appropriate way to calculate it, given the mobility of water and given the fact that these pipes and whatnot are often sort of behind and out of closed doors, and also given the fact that the conditions that we cite that relate to water damage often have to do with air quality. And just because there's water damage in one piece of a building and down the hallway doesn't have any water damage doesn't mean that whatever the sort of air quality impacts associated with that water damage haven't expanded beyond the place where you can physically see the water.
Thank you. Does the report include more granular information, though, about water damage? For example, that particular building, the water damages in that room or in that floor or in that wing of the building, or it just, anecdotally says, or here are a few images of water damage in that building. We are concluding that there is water damage here.
It's a combination of things. There's three things I'll point to. One, there's a paragraph at the start of that water damage section where we sort of go building by building. This is on page 29 of the report. We go building by building and describe the nature of the water damage that we observed in the different buildings. Those descriptions are aligned with the photographs that come on the next few pages. Pages, I don't know, 30 through 36. And then, the building that I cited, Taylor Hall, where the water damage is the most extensive, that one also has the most detailed information. There's an appendix that's attached to the report that speaks like very specifically to the conditions that were detailed there.
Okay, but if I wanted to calculate the percentage of the square footage that actually suffers from water damage, do I have that information in the report to do that calculation?
No, you wouldn't be able to do the sort of calculation you're describing, which I think is like a square, maybe I'm not supposed to ask you questions back, but I think you're describing like measuring the area where there is visible water, right? And then counting that square footage and then calculating your own percentage. You wouldn't be able to accomplish that with the detail that's in the report.
Okay. Similarly, with respect to accessibility, I think Mrs. Butler before me pointed out that accessibility is, can have different levels or different levels of severity, if you will. When I think the final number there was that 87% of the generality of the buildings suffer from accessibility, would it be fair to say that some suffer from a bigger, or more severe or more acute accessibility issues, whereas others, it's milder?
I'll say that the accessibility issues throughout the campus vary from building to building. Now, whether you want to say one's more mild or one's more extreme, I mean, it matters to the person who's trying to use them. So I don't know, maybe the mild example wouldn't be so mild for someone who's attempting to get into one of those buildings or use the building.
Yeah, but I think you could say the accessibility problems are also a code problem, and it's prevalent throughout the entire campus.
Thank you.
And I would also say if the restrooms for a building are not accessible, the whole building is not accessible from a restroom standpoint. If there's no elevator, the entire second floor is not accessible. It's not, the square footage of the elevator. So,
of course. But that's exactly my question. I mean, do we count the square footage of every building the same way? Maybe some buildings have all those issues that you mentioned. Maybe in others, the accessibility issues are much milder. In other words, the restrooms are accessible. Maybe it's a single floor, but there is, let's say, a heavy door in the entrance. Do we still count it? I'm just trying to understand how informative is that number, 87%? What does it actually mean once we break it down to the issues in the various buildings?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I would say, and Chris can correct me if he thinks I'm wrong, but I would say between bathrooms, door widths, exits that go nowhere, the accessibility problems and violations are extremely significant throughout the entire campus. So I doubt that the 84% or whatever is far off from being pretty close to accurate.
And if I could just tack on one thing about the percentages, there's no statutory requirement about a certain percentage. The percentages are included to provide the board and the reader with an understanding of the nature of the condition, right? And they tie to that word generality, but it's not, the statute doesn't say that 65% of the buildings need to be X, right, or Y. It's an informative metric intended to sort of speak to the conditions throughout the campus.
Okay, thank you, that's appreciated. I just wanted to make sure that I understand the significance of those numbers and how they're calculated, because I think we all see that it's a mixed bag. There are some buildings who are in great condition and some buildings who are in very poor condition, and so there's a lot of granularity here. But in any case, that's all I had to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we'll bring over person identified as Jim. Welcome.
Hi.
If you could state your full name, and then Mr. Mariziti will swear you in.
Sure. My name is James Bash, and I live on South Harrison Street.
Good evening, Mr. Ash. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. So my comments are mostly about sort of, it's been kind of sad to watch the history of this campus over the years. I guess it's almost a decade now where the administrators of Rider tried to monetize the campus of a world-class choir college. And I think some of us had relief when finally the town was going to be taking it over and finding other purposes for it, because it was clear that it wasn't going to become a choir college again. So my questions have to do with the future of the Westminster site. So my wife and I read the headline topics this week, and we both were immediately concerned to say, well, gosh, this sounds like the town is going to be setting up for demolition of these buildings. And I'm happy to hear in some of the earlier comments from the panelists that that is not necessarily the case, that it's more of a legal issue about moving forward in a planning process, although we have seen historic buildings that in an A&R that were demolished after it was declared in need of redevelopment. So my question for Mr. Colley, I had a couple of questions. The first is, you know, reading the article in your report talks about lack of accessibility, old heating and cooling systems, cracked sidewalks. You know, a lot of us live in old houses, ourselves included. This just comes with the territory with older historic buildings. And, you know, a previous member of the public asked if there was any allowance made for the age of the building. And we're talking about 1933, these beautiful historic 1933 brick buildings. In your experience, is some of these things uncommon for century-old buildings? Or should we really be alarmed that this is really unusual for century-old buildings on private college campuses?
This is my first redevelopment study of a college campus from the 1930s, but I have been in plenty of buildings like this. And I will tell you that I believe that the nature of the water damage that I observed throughout these buildings is unusual. Yeah, I don't think that's like par for the course for an older building. And, you know, as it relates to the boiler, there's a appendix attached to the report that's prepared by an expert in boilers. I don't know what their exact professional capacity is, but the conclusion of that report is not simply, this is an old boiler, right? The conclusion of that report is that this boiler, I can even probably tell you exactly what it says, but to paraphrase it, it says that one of the two boilers isn't even functioning anymore, and the other boiler has reached the end of its life, but not simply because it's old, but because it's really dilapidated, perhaps to use a word. So I don't know if we can really like draw a direct parallel between someone who maybe lives in an older house. I'm actually doing this from my 1925 house right now, right? So yeah, I don't think that like that's the sort of thing that we're talking about here. Like the conditions that I observed and the conditions that I showed in the photographs, like to me, are not consistent with normal buildings from the 1930s that I walk around, particularly as it relates to water damage.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, if we're talking cracked sidewalks, I've got a lot of them to sell you right out in front of our house. So and also we recently went through a couple of referendums with our high school and other public schools to replace their heating, their HVAC systems because they were dated. It maybe didn't work 100%, needed updating and so on. So, I mean, it's not uncommon when you're dealing with an old property to see old things, right? I mean, these buildings have been around for a century. So I'm hopeful that, you know, they're not going to be raised, especially the 1933 era and the original quad. But then when I hear Mayor Freda saying these buildings are well past their prime, Mr. Freda, and the value is in the land, I'm not quite as reassured. Now, I know that's not your bailiwick here, and we're just talking about this A&R, but I concur with some of the comments of the previous members of the public, particularly Mr. Zinder and Mr. Madison. And the question Mr. Madison asked, I think, is a good one, and it wasn't answered because Mr. Mariziti sort of preempted it. But maybe I'll ask you, Mr. Colley, in situations like this, so it's been 1.5 years since the town made the ordinance to buy the property, and then it was purchased last April. So it's been about 1 year since the eminent domain. In your experience, are these types of reports done before the closing of a major transaction? I mean, you're a professional. You do this. This is your job. This is your career. Are you employed? Is your firm employed to do this before the closing of transactions, as would happen with a traditional house, right? So I'm going to have the inspection happening before I put down that final money, and the contract's made, but it's not closed. So when in the process does this type of report normally happen? Are we sort of unusual in that we're happening kind of 1 year after the closing of the deal?
So I think you're talking about two separate things here. And let me be clear about like what I do, right? And what my job is.
Right.
I am not a home inspector, right? So the reason why I cite so much.
Didn't say that.
I know, but just
Right.
just to be clear, like,
Yeah.
so the reason why I have to cite so many of these appendices about the boiler conditions is that, like, I'm a planner and I evaluate the property against the criteria, and I rely on the sources and the information that I can compile, as well as my own eyes, right, to like prepare that report. I would not be commissioned to evaluate buildings in the way that I think you're describing, which is like, you know, a cost estimation type thing,
right,
prior to a building. So I can't really answer the question because it's not actually what I do. As it relates to like when is an area in need of redevelopment study usually done, it could happen at any point in a process. It really could. So I don't think this is particularly unusual to be doing a redevelopment study at this moment. But if you were to come to me at a different point 1 year ago, I probably would have said the same thing. I don't think it would have been unusual then. And 1 year from now, maybe not even. But so it can vary widely in terms of when the redevelopment study and designation take place.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I guess my final comment would be that I hope that, considering it seems like the town the council was aware of hopefully some of these issues before making that final purchase, and I see Councilman Cohen, you're nodding your head, then hopefully the town also planned for the possibility, eventuality of restoring some of these magnificent buildings, especially the older historic ones. And I hope that the A&R leads to that, and that we're putting our trust in the right process here, rather than sort of any being blindsided. I think that's what maybe some of the comments you're seeing tonight, or folks are just maybe a little anxious and like, okay, we've read a lot about the A&Rs, and we're trying to figure out what do they mean, where do they go, and so hopefully, fingers crossed, it goes in the right direction, where we're saving what we can. That's going to be a resource. Not just the land, but a historic resource and a beautiful, a city on the hill, which is every time I drive by there, ride my bike, it's a beautiful thing to behold. Thank you very much and have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Bash. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Justin Lesko?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to explain one or two things about what an A&R is and isn't, or just kind of reaffirm it, because I think I've heard some comments tonight that are extrapolating one area in need of redevelopment in town as if that's the normal kind of procedure. And I'm, of course, talking about the former seminary properties where the buildings were taken down in between the designation and the redevelopment plan. Just to be clear, the town could tear down any or all of the buildings today, and could have done so since we got the keys a year ago, the town has not chosen to do that. I think for a lot of reasons that we all know, like as I mentioned earlier, the original quad being in the master plan is something to study. So the A&R, is not a pathway to do that. That could be done. There are no local, state, or national historic protections on this site at all right now. The town could take them down, but like I said earlier, this process does allow for us to kind of make a more nuanced plan than one we would normally have. And of course, a more nuanced one is not, does not mean you go in and you bring the bulldozer as the first step or as any part of the step necessarily.
All right, thanks for that clarification. We have Ann Weber coming over. We have William Wolf has raised his hand again, so I'm going to ask you, Mr. Mariziti, if someone has already posed questions, is there, my inclination would be to allow Mr. Wolf to come back and ask more, but not go afield of the question that's before us tonight. Is that?
I think that's right, and I think it would be appropriate to get everybody else first.
Yes.
Anybody
Thank
else who's waiting.
Okay, so if you'd bring over Ann Weber, please. And then we'll hear from Mr. Wolf. And as of right now, there are no other hands raised. So to the public, if any of you who have not spoken, or even if you have and have further questions, now's the time to raise your hand. Are we able to bring over Ann Weber?
I've received another notification of declining to be promoted. I'll try one more time.
Okay, thank you.
And just for members of the public that might not have been used Zoom before, what we do is we ask you if you want to be promoted to a panelist, and then you have to affirmatively click yes to be moved over.
Looks like Ms. Weber declined. However, Mr. Wolf is back.
Okay. Hello again, Mr. Wolf.
Hello, Madam Chairwoman. I just wanted to make a very quick comment because I'm concerned that members of the public have expressed concern about existing uses of the buildings. And there's been a lot of the comments in the report about accessibility. And the legislation that requires that accessibility is newer than any of the buildings on the campus except for the most recent Performing Arts Center. And in no way is it illegal or immoral to use a building that is inaccessible. The only time that requirement comes into play is when you reconstruct or are constructing a new building. Then you have to meet those requirements, but you don't have to vacate a building that doesn't meet those new accessibility requirements. That's my only comment.
Okay, thank you. Anev or Anev Weber, if you would activate your camera and unmute yourself in order to speak to the board, that'd be great, please. There we go. Now you just need to unmute.
Okay.
There. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Ann Weber, and I live at 498 Stockton Street.
And do you affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes. Well, thank you for letting me get through the vicissitudes of Zoom here. I just, want to say that I do, I appreciate Mr. Wolf's comments just now, that there are many exceptions and many ways of providing accessibility in buildings. The other thing that I think we need not to lose sight of here is, okay, there's water damage, there's the boilers are shot. So that these are repairs that would need to be made to these buildings before they can be used. But if you are going to have buildings on the site which are to be used and you build them new, you are paying for a new roof that presumably does not leak. You are paying for, ramps and elevators. And so just to say, well, these buildings are not accessible and are therefore, it's 80% inaccessible. It's therefore, they are worthless. They are, just they can't be reused. Well, they can be reused. And there's the value, both in terms of money in the existing structure of these buildings, is considerable, and also the value of the existing materials and the existing carbon that has gone into these buildings. That does not need to happen again. There does not need to be new brick made for buildings like this. So I think, yes, there are clearly problems with these buildings, and they would need substantial renovation to be able to be reused. But if we're considering a use that requires a building, we need to make sure that we are considering that in context. Thank you.
Thank you. Understood. I think it's clear there's a real strong interest in adaptive reuse for these, at least some of these buildings. And I too hope that comes to pass and expect that it will. Are there other members of the public who would like to address the board? Now would be the time to raise your hand virtually. Seeing none, I will close the public comment and cross-examination portion of the meeting and invite other thoughts, comments, questions from board members or a motion.
I would like to move to approve, I'll try to figure out how to rephrase this, to approve the recommendation to council to move forward with declaring the 2 properties that were described as in need of redevelopment or something to that effect.
Actually,
that's good.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's
excellent for a newbie, Linda.
And actually, there is a.
I'm really impressed.
That was very well done, and I have prepared a written resolution that would accomplish that. And the title of it is Resolution Recommending to the Mayor and Council of the Municipality of Princeton that 27 Franklin Avenue, Block 7301, Lot 1, and 101 Walnut Lane, Block 31.01, Lot 105 be designated as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment. And that resolution cites and refers to the report and the conclusions arrived at by Mr. Colley.
That's
Great.
strange. That's exactly what I heard Linda say.
Yes.
I will
That's what I-
amend my motion to move the resolution as just presented by our attorney.
Perfect.
Thank you. Mr. O'Donnell, were you raising your hand to second or did you? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Battle, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Mr. Boddingheimer,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen,
Yes.
Mayor Frida,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Ms. Nuka,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Swimmer,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Chair Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Well, thank you. And thanks to members of the public too for such a keen interest in this. I know it's shared by many, many people in the town. There are 27 members of the public still here, FYI. So as I mentioned earlier, if the mayor and councilman, if you could talk just a little bit, or maybe Justin, I'm not sure who to throw this question to about, what comes next, assuming council accepts the recommendation, declares this an area in need of redevelopment. How do you expect the process to play out? What happens next?
Well, first they would have to actually formally accept the recommendation. I believe that will likely be on the 27th of April at their next meeting. And then from there, it would be a decision of where to go next, basically to prepare the redevelopment plan. Like I said earlier, we generally here would hire a consultant, most often by resolution. Then that consultant would work on a plan. But this is not really no redevelopment plan for an area in need is the same. So I can't gauge right now what exactly that's going to look like, or how long that's going to take.
Okay. Anything to add, Mayor Frida or Councilman Cohen, about
I think it's pretty obvious.
process itself?
Yeah, well, look, the process has to include more public input. And I would hope that the governing body would agree to a work session to talk about the Choir College property and thoughts on how to develop it or what to use it for. But could be municipal uses, there could be school uses. So, anyway, so I think a lot yet to be determined.
Yeah, and there was the one question community survey, which I gather there was good response to that. It was just one question, but it was an open-ended question, and so I'm sure a lot of people responded, and a lot of information and thoughts were gathered, and so that's a starting point anyway.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Chris, you could weigh in on this, but there were results of not just that survey, but a fair amount of work that Topology has done in studying the site conditions and that were presented at council. So not design options for the redevelopment plan going forward, but a lot of information about what has gone into the process so far.
That's right. Yeah, we made a presentation about site characteristics and about objectives back in November, actually, and I believe that presentation still lives on the website.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are curious about questions like, do we want to preserve the historic quad or, whatever else? I mean, there's a long list of objectives that were identified by the group that's been working on this so far, and it's all in the public realm for people to take a look.
Good. And that's on the municipal website under council meetings or council. I'm just looking for a little bit clearer direction of if people do want to go and find exactly what you're talking about, that presentation, those findings and objectives, exactly where are they?
There's a section that includes minutes from past meetings. That's one place to look. There's a section that has the agendas of past meetings. That's another place to look. I'm trying to pull up the website to see where else on there it might be. I don't know, David or Justin, if you remember other specific places on the website.
YouTube as well. The presentation itself, as with all council meetings, is recorded and on YouTube. I don't know if Chris, I think you said November of last year. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but if it was November, you have two to look at, probably to figure out which one it was.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing is you can just go to the town website, which is princetonnj.gov. And there's a search feature. Just put in Westminster Choir College and a whole bunch of stuff pops up.
That's right. That's right. That's the thing to do. Thank you, Mayor. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, our next meeting is May 7th. Anything else before we say goodnight? Seeing none, Mr. Cohen.
Move to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. Good conversation. Interesting work yet to come. See you in May, if not before.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thanks again, Joe.
Pleasure.